Oh, shoot. Are we already live?
Hold on. I'm checking the Wi-Fi again.
Yeah, I believe you are. There.
Let me, if you want to, you can.
Nothing wrong. She's allergic. No, I have nothing wrong. I've met people with gluten allergies. That's just weird. Email.
Forgot about the speaker.
Okay.
Okay.
Hold up. So we're on?
Yeah, it's live.
Okay. Let me see. And then how do I just go completely? And I'm there? Or how do I get rid of this?
I don't remember. Let me see. I think it goes away. I want to say it goes away. Oh yeah, you can just move.
Everything good?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Hey, there you go.
Hey, Matt. So sorry. I think our server went down. I'm like sweating. It's awful. How are you?
Good. I was thinking we had the wrong time for a second.
No. I was like, we are on mountain time, right? And so it was awful. But how are you?
I'm doing well. It says we've got a sketchy connection here, so hopefully it'll hang on.
Okay.
At least on my end, that's what it's saying.
All right, everybody that's joining in with us right now, this is Matt Christiansen. He is Matt C on YT. That is Matt Christiansen on YouTube, on Twitter. And he does realize that it looks like Matt Kahn. He used to be Skag3 on YouTube. And I'm not sure if you can find him on Facebook, but he's also Beta from Beauty and the Beta. It is a really good podcast. If you guys are ever interested in listening to political commentary with some banter in there, that is the place to go. So welcome, Matt. I'm Isaac Yepes. We've been talking for about a week or two now. I am the recruitment officer of the UTEP College Republicans.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me. I really appreciate being here. I'm going to try. I've actually prepared a PowerPoint, so I'm going to try to screen share that. I realize that takes me off camera, unfortunately, but I'll be back on camera once we do a Q&A at the end here. But I think it might help to illustrate some of the concepts that I want to talk about. So let's see if I can get that queued up.
Alrighty.
Share screen. Okay. So if I pull this up, you should see a PowerPoint.
Yeah,
now,
and
right?
I can see you. You're good.
Oh, and you can see me. Well, that's great. That's even better if that's true. Awesome. Okay. Well, anyway, thanks for having me. To Isaac and to you guys at the UTEP College Republicans. I'm really honored to speak with you guys, and that's because this is actually the first opportunity I've had to speak to a student group as a non-student. So it's a really cool opportunity for me too, and I really appreciate the invite. And the reason I appreciate the invite is because it gave me an opportunity to sit down and reflect on how almost all of my political perspectives have been challenged, and many have outright changed over the last year. So my discussion today is going to focus on my own political homelessness, as the title slide here might suggest, I hope. But it's going to be structured as follows. I'm not gifted in the art of PowerPoint, so bear with me. Nor will it be the prettiest presentation ever, but I hope it will be effective. But it's going to be structured as follows. So I want to give you an idea of where I came from politically and what formed my previous alignment on the left. And then I want to give you some examples from the last year that have changed or challenged my worldview. And then we'll discuss the problem that I view on the current left, and one that I think has been electorally consequential as of Tuesday, which is pretty interesting. Good timing for this, to talk about a lot of these things. And then think about what we can do to solve it. And then, of course, we'll do some Q&A at the end. So a little bit about myself. I was a kid whose political worldview was shaped under the Bush administration. I was convinced that the Republican Party was a big bad force for imperialism. It had backward social views. I was a kid who interned for a Democratic politician in college. I was a kid who knocked doors for Obama. I was a kid who voted Obama twice. I was a kid who checked the Democratic box in every single election for which I was eligible to vote. Until this year when I voted to make America great again. So what caused that flip? And how did my worldview go from firmly persuaded in one direction to questioning everything to leaning against it. Well, that's going to be the story of my eviction from the left. And I say eviction because I believe the political left, the Democratic Party, self-described liberals, whatever you want to call them, they have mutated into an extremist parody of themselves. And I think they kicked me out. I believe they have betrayed core values on which we all agreed. And I'll give you examples of things we have all observed over the last year that have left me wondering what happened to my former political home and looking for intellectual refuge elsewhere. And I want to talk a little bit, and actually, for now, I'm going to take this screen share off so I can just be up on camera a bit here. Bear with me. Stop sharing. There we go. So I should be on camera, right?
There you are.
I want to talk about a little bit about the philosophical basis I had for considering myself a liberal or a progressive or whatever term you want to be, a reliable supporter of the Democratic Party. When my political opinion shaped, there were two things that I thought the Democratic Party spoke to that attracted me. And the first was cultural libertarianism, the idea that you should be able to do and live how you want, provided you're not really harming anybody or infringing on anybody else's rights. And I thought the Democratic Party spoke pretty well to that. The other thing the Democratic Party spoke to, at least I thought, was creating good opportunity for everybody. I also had a firm belief that personal initiative, personal responsibility, personal accountability, these things were a given, and anyone and everyone who wants to work hard to better themselves would do that given a good opportunity. And so I kind of had a worldview that said, if we provide people with a good opportunity, a lot of these problems that we observe will be solved. We could solve poverty, crime. We could minimize these things if we did, as a society, our part in providing good opportunity. High-quality schools, high-quality jobs, high-quality public accommodation. So I saw a sizable role for government in creating these opportunities for people. And I believed that if these opportunities existed, people would take advantage of them. They would educate themselves. They would work hard. I thought personal initiative was a given. We just need good opportunity. And it's that second factor that formed the philosophical basis from my alignment with the left, that need for good opportunity. And that's what I want to focus on today, because that is my form of persuasion that the last year has challenged the most. Let me pull the screen share back up here. And I want to move on to a little bit of a philosophical thought exercise here. And I want us to just think about the concept of success, just the concept of success generally. In any given success you could have in your life. Maybe it's winning a sports game. Maybe it's getting an A on a paper. Maybe it's getting a great job. Success is almost always a combination of two factors. On the one hand, on the left there, you've got good opportunity that I was previously speaking to. On the other hand, you've got personal initiative, personal responsibility, personal effort. Even for you guys as students, your path to success relies upon the opportunity afforded to you by the university. Maybe you've received some grants. Maybe you've received some personal scholarships. You likely have some student loans. Maybe your parents helped. But a lot of people are giving you a great opportunity to learn and to think critically and to better yourself. But that opportunity is wasted if you don't take it seriously, if you don't study hard, if you don't give it your best effort. And that's how my college years were too. I worked hard in high school, which opened a great opportunity for me to get into a great college, and with help from my parents and help from grant money and help from loaned money, I made good on that. And I made good on that opportunity by taking personal responsibility and working hard through college to succeed. And even the reason I'm here speaking with you now is because I've worked very hard in making the best YouTube channel I can. And I've taken advantage of a great opportunity by the people who developed YouTube into an empire that it is today. The people who created the infrastructure that I've used to distribute my thoughts. So success is almost always a combination of these things. Opportunity plus initiative. Opportunity plus personal responsibility. A great job opportunity doesn't mean a lot if you sit on the couch and you don't apply. A great business idea doesn't mean that much if you launch the business in a desert and there's nobody out there to buy your product. Hard work doesn't necessarily get you all the way in that circumstance. So success is opportunity plus initiative. And if we aren't seeing the type of success that we'd like to see, we got to think about which of these components is lacking. As I said, I used to think that initiative was a given. Everyone would try if you gave them a chance. And what I've noticed with several factions of the modern left is a refusal to accept any part of that personal responsibility or that personal initiative side of this equation. These factions have really challenged my previous idea that personal responsibility and initiative are a given. So I want to discuss a few of the examples I've observed in the last year. Some are some of the more divisive factions, I should say, of the modern left that you're just expected to get on board with, or else you're sexist, or you're a homophobe, or you're a bigot, or you oppose equality, all these parade of horrible names that we've all had thrown on us. I suspect none of you are necessarily strangers to that type of treatment. But first I want to talk about the big F word, feminism, because feminism is one of the left's ideological subgroups that serves as a prime example, in my view, of what happens when people observe unequal outcome and they presume the cause is discrimination rather than presuming the cause is people's free choices. When you presume the problem is a lack of opportunity, which in turn makes any personal effort or personal accountability or personal responsibility irrelevant and futile. Whoops. So let's think about some of feminism's main issue concerns. We often hear that 77% figure, women only make 77 cents on the man's dollar. You're probably all familiar with this, or you might be familiar with this as a myth, but it fits the kind of the mold that I'm trying to illustrate here. Now, so on a surface level, that 77-cent figure sounds like a problem, but of course, on that surface level, you presume men and women are doing the same work in the same field, with the same qualifications, the same hours, and of course they're not. That figure comes from very broad labor bureau statistics that are considering only men and women's earnings generally. It doesn't consider the jobs that they did. It doesn't consider how many hours they worked. It doesn't consider what their qualifications were. So in that analysis, you are quite literally lumping janitors in with rocket scientists and complaining that the financial outcomes aren't the same. I'll give you an example. I thought at one point I was interested in law school. But after college, I decided I didn't want to dive headfirst into 3 years of intense study and alcoholism and all the things that go along with being a lawyer and all that garbage that I didn't want to do. So that's a choice that I made personally. And I think it was the right one for me. And it came at the cost of a lower pay grade compared to my friends who did go to law school and who did pass the bar and who are practicing law currently. But I don't complain about their higher wages and claim I'm being discriminated against because I chose to forgo the opportunity that would have earned me that money. The opportunity for law school was there for me, but I chose to forfeit that opportunity, and I accept the personal responsibility and the results of that choice. Similarly, we know women often choose lower paying jobs with the trade-off of more flexibility, less hours, more time to raise a family, which is what they often choose to do. When a woman chooses not to become a lawyer or a doctor, instead opting to be a mom, and that is her free, autonomous choice, that's not oppression. That's not discrimination. That's not lack of opportunity. That's actually perfect freedom in action, the way we should want it to be. Another reason we don't see the earnings equal among men and women is because women often choose not to study, I should say, in STEM fields, science, math, tech, engineering. We often hear feminists discuss how women's underrepresentation in STEM is a contributing factor to the wage gap and how it's the product of some sort of secret patriarchal scientist conspiracy and to keep women out of STEM fields in academia. But I don't see any evidence to suppose that's the case, and most rational minds I know don't either. In the U.S., we now have more women attending and graduating from college than men, for example. So why let them in college campuses at all if we don't want them to study? I was a political science major, and I only did the bare minimum of lab science required to graduate. But I often joke that when I was in school, there was no patriarchy guard at the door to the chemistry lab. And I saw plenty of young women enter without obstruction on my podcast that you had referenced earlier, Isaac. We do a weekly call-in show, and sometimes I'll have female college students call in, and I ask them to confirm, and they usually do, there is no patriarchy door or patriarchy guard at the door of the chemistry lab. So we have all the reason in the world here to suppose that the key issues feminism whines about aren't necessarily even problems at all. They appear to be the product of free women's choices, and if so, that's not a problem to deal with. That's the exact type of freedom for which we should strive. These things only appear to be problems when we remove that personal responsibility component out of that success formula we were looking at earlier. So to feminists, if you view higher earnings for women and more women in STEM fields as success, the opportunities are there. Colleges welcome you in numbers larger than men. Study hard in a STEM field. You will get a high-paying job, almost assuredly. Or don't and be a mom if you prefer. There's nothing wrong with that. Either choice is fine. Just don't complain about the free choice you make. And don't pretend that the opportunity component is missing from that equation for success. We observe some similar trends or similar ideological shortcomings in another faction that I'd like to discuss with the left, and another faction that you're just supposed to be on board with and not question because that is the ideological conformity you're expected to display. But let's consider another one of these factions you got to support or you're a bigot, Black Lives Matter. Now, Black Lives Matter's primary complaint, as I'm sure you're all aware, is this idea that the police are some bloodthirsty racist monolith, that somehow cops are inherently systemically racist and they target black people with lethal force at rates much higher than other races. And like feminism's complaints, depending on the study you believe, I was just looking at some New York Times statistics, and there's a variety of data to look at on the issue, but plenty of data do show more blacks killed by cops per capita than other races. The data I saw from the New York Times said about 2 to 3 times as frequently per arrest, which of course is not good. But those data alone are insufficient because those data do not describe the whole picture. Blacks commit about 8 times the violent crime of the general population. Now, if you're committing violent crime at a rate 8 times higher than the general population, lethal police force in response at 2 to 3 times higher compared to the general population actually might be pretty good considering the circumstances. Now, of course, we all want lower violent crime rates. We all want the lowest possible use of lethal force from the police. But if you go to Black Lives Matter's website, you'll see a whole issue page and all the issues that they want to address. You will see no mention of the high crime rate in the black community. You will see no mention of the decay of the black family, the rise of fatherless culture that undoubtedly plays a role in this unacceptably high crime rate. In fact, you'll see the nuclear family condemned as an instrument of Western prescribed patriarchy, and that's not a joke, that's actually on there. The nuclear family is an instrument of Western prescribed patriarchy. So what are we left with? This is another leftist movement that refuses to accept the role of personal responsibility and accountability in that formula for success. Now, maybe to Black Lives Matter's complaints, maybe there is some government role or some social role that we have in creating better opportunity in urban communities that are struggling. Maybe that is the case. But it's undoubtedly and demonstrably the case that there is a culture that lacks personal responsibility and personal initiative that we also have to address if we want that formula for success to succeed itself. And I think it's that unwillingness to accept any role in the problem that has kind of exposed Black Lives Matter, that has made it unpopular with the American public and politically divisive. There's another example of this phenomenon that I'm happy to talk about this week. And honestly, I'm a little bit surprised to talk about it. And that, I don't know if I'm surprised, but I guess I didn't predict it necessarily going this way. But that is Hillary Clinton's loss to one Donald Trump in Tuesday's 2016 presidential election. This is the Hillary Clinton, this candidate here. This is the candidate with all the opportunity in the world, the money from the richest people in the world, the endorsement from and campaign help from the incumbent president, the coddling of the media, the desire to break the glass ceiling and elect the first woman president. All of this opportunity afforded to her, and many on the left still want to argue the opportunity wasn't sufficient because they refuse to accept any personal responsibility for their poor candidate and their poor ideas. There's too many sexists. That's it. There's too many racists. That's it. And that's why they voted the way they did. Or they want to blame the Electoral College. All of a sudden we have this very convenient opposition to the Electoral College, this argument that it's an undemocratic instrument, even though in my view that argument couldn't be further from the truth. It's functioning exactly as it's designed to function, and that's a good thing. We can talk about that later if you like. James Comey is now a villain for what they would say is electioneering, when back in July he was an upstanding man who does his job regardless of the politics. It's James Comey's fault. That's what Hillary said to a bunch of her fundraisers on Saturday. Don't worry about whose fault the FBI investigation into Hillary is, or why it's happening, or what the findings were. Just know it's James Comey's fault. James Comey's fault for looking into it. And of course, blame WikiLeaks as well, and insist that it's so obvious that Russia is trying to interfere with our elections without sufficient evidence to make that claim. And don't worry what's in WikiLeaks. Don't bother reading WikiLeaks. Just be worried that it's foreign actors trying to influence the thoughts in your head. So what they've done is they've thrown, and to be fair, not everyone is doing this. I think there's a good faction of people in the Democratic Party and on the political left who are taking this opportunity to think thoughtfully about what they could have done better, and are taking that important opportunity to be personally responsible and think introspectively and start thinking about how they could have improved the situation and what they can do better to come back and win next time. But there are plenty, Hillary herself, it appears, who will throw everything they have to perpetuate this idea that she was robbed, that instead of taking that opportunity to self-reflect and self-critique and improve for next time, they will just insist that it's everyone else's fault for a number of irrelevant reasons often. And they will demonstrate there is no more culture of personal responsibility on the left anymore with this particular group, which is unfortunate. And the reason that this is unfortunate, each of these examples is unfortunate in its own right. But what I think is most troublesome about this is I think that this allergy to personal responsibility, it's bad enough in itself, but I do believe that there are some constitutional implications culturally, and if we believe that politics are downstream from culture, as Andrew Breitbart said, this is something we might have to think about as some of these cultural values come at odds with our constitutional values. So to be clear, I'm not going to make the argument that the Bill of Rights is in some type of legal peril. It's not, at least yet. But if culture does influence the way we shape our law, the way we shape our politics, that's something to think about. And you think about each one of these individually. If you believe, as many of my lefty friends do, that other people are responsible for your feelings and that your feelings aren't your personal responsibility, then it starts to become acceptable to silence others. And that silence can take the form of modification of speech or words. For example, gender pronouns. And I know you guys have just spoken with Dr. Jordan Peterson. We've seen the whole gender pronoun controversy at the University of Toronto. So they might ask you, you will use certain words or face punishment. Of course, can come the other way around, even more harshly perhaps. You will not use certain words or certain phrases, or you will be punished. Now, of course, that type of thing is many legal steps away from being a legal reality in this country for sure, but it all starts with culture. And we are witnessing cultural seeds being planted here. We're also witnessing those cultural seeds as they pertain to free assembly. I trust you guys remember the pictured Trigglypuff here, and I'm sure you're all familiar, or hopefully you are, famous for heckling Milo and Christina Hoff Sommers and Stephen Crowder last spring and insisting they be deplatformed from speaking at University of Massachusetts Amherst. Tonight, in fact, right before coming live, have you guys seen what's going on with Ben Shapiro at DePaul?
He just got banned from speaking there, right?
Literally, as we speak, he was trying to speak with Christina Hoff Sommers at DePaul. And he had been previously banned or something. I don't even know. I guess he was banned from coming on campus. But they said, if you step on campus, we will have you arrested. Just for trying to come and share some ideas on campus. And of course, they went off campus to go speak somewhere else. But this is another example of it. If your feelings are more important than other people's right to assemble, and of course, DePaul is their own institution. They can ban whoever they want. But again, we're witnessing the cultural seeds being planted here. And that's what leads to politics down the road. That's what leads to political thought down the road, laws and changing laws down the road. So we're seeing that as well. And then, of course, you might remember a big event that really got my eyebrow raised was Trump's rally in Chicago last March. If you recall, that's the one that was shut down with violent disruption, which I guess is just called protest now. That's what the left is going with. Violent disruption and protest are really the same thing. And that was an example. At that time, I considered myself an opponent to Trump. But that was an example where, think about what you want about the candidate. Nobody should have their political rally shut down through violent intimidation. I don't care if he actually is Hitler. He can be literally Hitler. I still don't want people's political rallies being shut down through violence. Maybe if it's actually Hitler and he's actually doing Hitler things, then we'll talk about it. But I don't have evidence to believe that was the case just yet. Another thing, the presumption of innocence, I believe to be under a little bit of cultural assault here. And that's observed through a lot of these affirmative consent policies emerging through college campuses. And I don't know if that's something in El Paso or not, but in a lot of these schools, what we've done is we've gone ahead and reversed the presumption of innocence, and we assign guilt unless you can prove that consent was affirmatively delivered. And then campus feminists refuse to consider a sexual encounter a mutual one by default unless mutual consent can be proven. And then, of course, they're going to resist efforts to teach women self-defense because, of course, that would require some of the personal responsibility we're talking about here, which we can't have. At least they don't want any of that. So instead, we'll go with the solution of teaching men not to rape, which is another increasingly popular one. And then, of course, the right to bear arms. Speaking of self-defense, among the left, I think we see an increasing hostility toward the Second Amendment, which, of course, protects your right to your ultimate personal responsibility, your right to self-preservation. And I think we're seeing increasing not just a willingness, but a desire to surrender that right to the state. Any problem that can conceivably be blamed on guns will be blamed on guns. Don't blame San Bernardino or Orlando on Islamic ideology and some of the problems that arise there. Blame it on guns instead. Don't blame cultural decay in Chicago for the rampant violence. Blame it on guns instead, even though they're heavily controlled. We can't be personally responsible, in my view, is what these people believe. So let's go ahead and surrender our personal responsibility to the state. And of course, the Second Amendment is a great example of that attitude, in my observation. So these are the issues that really concern me. I worry the consequence of the culture the left is cultivating, that culture totally void of personal responsibility, could lead to the weakening of some of these core principles and some of the core values that made this country the best the world has ever seen. But there is reason for optimism. And that is that the ideas that we're talking about, the culture that gives me pause, these things are losing. We saw a direct repudiation of that culture at the ballot box on Tuesday, which was great in my mind. And not only did Donald Trump win, but Republicans also took the Congress, they took the Senate and the House, obviously, as well as 31 state governorships they now control, and 26 state legislatures. Democrats controlling only 13 state legislatures after Tuesday. So the good news is their ideas are losing, and if only through sheer electoral force, their ideas are going to have to be revised in order to remain competitive. And I think even if you're a staunch conservative or a staunch Republican, as many of you might be, you should want that. You should want to make the left great again, and I do too. And that's not even because I want to go back, or because I want them to win, or because I think they're right. The reason I want them to be great again is because I want honest, thoughtful, well-reasoned ideas constantly competing, because that's how the best ideas win. And the reason the Democrats got smacked this time around is because they didn't bother with the ideas. They thought if they called everyone racist and sexist and bigoted enough, they were entitled to win just by the comparison, but that's not going to fly anymore. And so the left is in sore need of some cultural and political reform. If we take my analysis, I think making the left great again means making the left personally responsible again, restoring a culture of initiative, hard work, taking advantage of opportunity given. Once they do that, once we can restore that kind of culture in the left again, I think we can resume talking about how to create good opportunity, how to cultivate that opportunity component of the success formula we were talking about earlier. That's a tough problem to solve because it's not one that you solve politically. This is a cultural problem. So if politics are a reflection of culture, politics are downstream from culture, like Andrew Breitbart said, we don't solve this issue in Congress. We don't solve this issue with the president. We solve it culturally, and that's incredibly difficult work. But the way we shift culture is by doing exactly what you and I are doing right now, and that's by discussing, by thinking critically, by debating, and by challenging others to do so. Maybe you write a blog, maybe you start a podcast, whatever you can do to contribute to discussion and ensure that there's a constant challenging of ideas always going on, because that's going to ensure that the best ideas rise. And that's exactly what you guys are doing here with your speaking series. And that's exactly why I'm very happy to be a part of it. And that's actually all I got for you. So I want to just say thanks for allowing me to share those ideas with you. And I hope it was worth your time and your consideration. And I'm happy and eager to take some questions or thoughts or anything you have on this topic.
Okay, so to start things off, you mentioned Black Lives Matter. And one of the things that turned me so against the movement was actually one of your videos where you did it by the numbers from the Department of Justice. And you illustrated that their narrative crumbles when you start to put forth the statistics that make up these, I think it's like every 26 hours an unarmed black man is shot or something like that. And you showed that the problem wasn't exactly the police with brutality, it was citizens against the police. Because by per capita numbers, you showed that the rate was just abysmal, where cops were getting killed, I think it was 3 or 5 to 1.
Yeah, so if I'm recalling correctly, this was actually a video that was in response to a Huffington Post author, and she had made the case. She was making the case, a couple of cases, let me say. One is that it's disproportionately dangerous to be black in your relationship with the police, which, as I mentioned, a very surface level statistical reading could lead you to that conclusion. But her other argument was that being a police officer isn't dangerous. And the reasoning was it's not in the top 10 most dangerous jobs. It's something like 5 per 100,000 officers will be killed in the line of duty, which, is very small. It's a very small rate, but it's ideally none. I mean, maybe not realistically none, but, we don't think that that's great. Anyway, point is that it's something like 3 to 4 arrests. 3 to 4 arrests of an African-American person will result in a shooting. 3 to 4 per 100,000. So on the one hand, she's saying 3 to 4 per 100,000 is an unacceptably dangerous rate. And then on the other hand, with cops, 5 per 100,000, well, that's not dangerous at all. Cops just need to do their job. So there was some particular dishonesty with that particular author, which I would have loved to talk about. And the other problem with the left, nobody wants to talk to anybody. I would love to talk to her about that issue and see how she explains it. I tried to do that. She said, "Oh, I only talk to racists for money." Okay, well, we can crowdfund that. So I sent her, how much would it cost? Blocked on every avenue.
Mm.
And then she doubled down and wrote another Huffington Post article. But
So I think it's actually incredibly brave what you and others do on YouTube, because you can be publicly labeled these things that can damage your public relations for the rest of your life, especially considering that your skin color is the wrong skin color according to them.
Yeah.
And it's bleeding over to anybody who disagrees with them at all. I mean, I'm brown myself, and it doesn't matter that I'm brown at that point. Once I disagree with the narrative, then I'm labeled a bigot, a fascist, a racist, homophobic, Islamophobic, whatever else they have this week. So given that, do you think that there's actual change happening now where the social climate is deciding that, no, it's not acceptable to just label people these things anymore?
Yeah, I think so. And I think Tuesday was evidence, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
And to your point, there's a reason why I didn't want to go by my real name and do this. I don't care, and I think you shouldn't care if they call you a racist, because they'll call you a racist or a bigot and nothing happens. But the problem is, and I know you guys talked about this a little bit with Blonde too, they'll go after your family. They'll try to get you fired. They'll try to get you punished in your place of work, or maybe in your place of study in your case, or whatever. That is the real unfortunate part. So to answer your question, I do think that the effectiveness of the name calling is weaker than ever now, and I think Tuesday was evidence of that. But what makes me worried is, as their power becomes less and less, I do worry that they're going to go to more and more extreme measures to try to counter it. And one of the unfortunate things about this election is they're pulling out all the ridiculous plays that they can. So we've seen a ton of violence. My former city, where I went to school, Portland, Oregon, they're smashing businesses, they're smashing cars, they're lighting stuff on fire. That sucks. And we have reason to believe a lot of these are proven to be fake. All these fake hate crimes erupting, everyone trying to pin it on people who voted Trump, that we all celebrated by spray painting swastikas on things or something, when maybe that happened in isolated cases, but several of these have been proven to be self-inflicted. So as they lose power, I worry they'll get more hysterical. That's my only worry. But I don't think we should be worried about their impact on our life. Even in Blonde's case, what did they do? They went on Twitter, they got mad. They tried to threaten her family, but then that sucks. But they're not going to do anything in the end. So, let them have their tantrums. And as long as they're having their tantrums, they're going to keep losing at the ballot box. They got to figure something out if they want to survive as a party. And I don't know about you, but I don't want one party controlling everything all the time. I actually think that's bad, even if I agree with them. Mm-hmm. I don't like that. But I want people with good reasoned ideas competing, not crybabies and adults. And we're kind of in the crybabies and adults paradigm here, unfortunately.
Yeah, well, I mean, I was afraid to draw swastikas all over my house until he won. And then I was like, oh, it's okay. Now, Tuesday, we were given the fact that the majority of America does not agree with this rhetoric that anybody who disagrees is automatically a bad person. Yeah. Now, given that and how wrong the mainstream media was, do you think this will lead to people reading beyond the headlines in the future?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the trend, even before all this, was already against them. I mean, cable news viewership declining, YouTube, alternative media, all of that stuff on the rise. And what's interesting is we'll actually see them start to come clean. I mean, even after the election, New York Times put out the editor of the New York Times put out that notification, or that brief write-up that was like, apparently we don't understand Americans. We don't have a good relationship with the truth. Apparently, we need to do a better job of recommitting ourselves to objective journalism. So sometimes I wonder, in the New York Times case, because they've been losing a lot of money, did they have this epiphany or this realization because they realized that they got a lot of their reporting wrong and their measurement of the American public wrong? Or are they realizing that conveniently when it starts to hit their financial books? I don't know. All I know is this and that's another component of what pushed me away from the left. I was never even a huge Trump fan, and even to this day, I don't know that I'm not really a Trump cheerleader, but I always felt compelled to defend him because of the behavior of his opponents. Like, the people who oppose him most are the worst people I know. And then, of course, the media just gave it was some of the most dishonest reporting. It's the most dishonest reporting I've ever seen. The worst example that comes to my mind, I don't know if you saw the example of when he was speaking to vets for an hour, and he talked about PTSD and suicide, and they made the claim that he said vets with PTSD are weak, which couldn't have been a worse distortion of what he had said. Examples like that, where it's like, I'm not a huge fan of this guy, but you gotta at least treat him fairly. This is a disgusting. It's a total distortion of your job. It's a dereliction of duty, and if you're not going to be honest, the good news is it creates a market for people who will tell the truth, and that's why you've seen a lot of people be very successful in that realm.
So, with the labeling still going on, even SNL, I think they just reinforced it with Dave Chappelle. I was pretty disappointed. Now, with this continued reinforcement of everybody who voted Trump automatically did it because of hatred, do you think that this backlash will convince the Rachel Maddows of the world that they are actually wrong and there was more to what Trump is saying than they would like to believe?
I don't know. I mean, we're seeing that split. Even it's so interesting because I used to, believe it or not, there was a time where I watched Rachel Maddows' show, and Bill Maher, I love Bill Maher, and I still try to. I still watch his show weekly, actually, and it makes me more mad than anything now because it's part of that culture of everything's sexist and racist. But this last week, even he kind of owned up a little bit to be like, well, there's some flaws in what we did here. We need to reevaluate our strategy. But the shift is, or the split is on, and what I mean is I don't know what the proportions are, but there's a segment of rational people, rational Democrats, rational people on the left, who are owning up to that. And I hope that their voices get amplified and win out, because they're going to have to if they want to start winning elections again. But there's a solid faction of people who aren't doing that. The video I'm working on right now is breaking down John Oliver's bit from this week, last week's night. I don't know if you saw that on Sunday night, and I'm not a regular viewer.
Yeah.
But good Lord, that segment was awful. He talked, there's... The problem is racist, and of course he shows a picture of a swastika on the side of a garage that's completely unsubstantiated. That picture came from Sean King's account, so we know how accurate that is. Mm-hmm. But there's not even a suspect in that case. And then of course he went on and made the case. He actually makes the case, as if you've seen it, you're aware, that the media helped Trump. Mm-hmm. That the media helped Trump, and his reasoning, part of his reasoning is that they played too many of his speeches unedited. As though that's somehow a disservice to the American voter to play a candidate's words unedited and let the populace decide for themselves. I have no idea where they're going to go. I think Sargon did some mention of this on his This Week in Stupid too. There's a lot of people like Cenk Uygur and Young Turks and stuff who believe that this identity politics obsessed progressive wing is going to be the faction that wins out here. And I really hope not, because that's the one that will lose forever. Mm-hmm. I don't know. There's so much of me that, it's like I said, I do want them to be fixed. However, they won't even let me talk to them. I would like to help fix it, but I can't. I can't. Yeah. Even on my social media this week, I don't post to Facebook really at all, but I did post once to Facebook. It was look, they might not be racist and sexist. Just consider the possibility that everyone who voted Trump might have some good ideas worth listening to. And the backlash I got from my friends, the ripping on me for just urging an open mind. I'm not even saying go Trump. Ripping on me for having an open mind. I got one of my friends deleted me for it. Whoa. Messaged me dude, I can't handle that. Deleted. Okay, that's real mature. So we don't talk that frequently anyway, but that's what we're dealing with.
Yeah, well, to that point, I think they would rather live in an evil world where they do actually believe, and it is totally plausible for them to believe, that there is 60 million people that just absolutely hate anything not white, not straight, not a man, which is, I mean, it's ridiculous, but they've bought into this ideology that has to survive based on that. And John Oliver, I think he denigrated the media for not editing enough of Trump's speeches because his entire job is based on editing and quote mining. So, if you don't do that in his world, you suck.
I was so disappointed, and I'm not a regular viewer of his. To be honest, I've never actually thought he was funny, so I'm not even the fairest critic of him because I've never enjoyed him as I have with some other people on the left. But he started off the bit by saying, instead of showing our daughters that they could grow up to be president, we chose someone, America decided that no grandpa is too racist or something like that. And it's like, John, I don't have daughters. I'm not a parent. I don't have a daughter. But if I did, I would teach her she can be anybody she wants to be. She can do anything she wants to do. I would tell her that every day. I would reinforce that ambition in her. My vote against Hillary Clinton is not a reflection of a belief that women don't have a place in the White House or that I don't believe my daughter could grow up to do that. It's entirely based on one particular woman who I find personally repellent and bad on policy. But John Oliver is going to say that vote means that we're going to teach young girls that they can't be president. I mean, what an insane, simplistic, I don't know. I want to swear, but I won't. Bad worldview.
Well, I mean, speaking of young girls, Wanda Sykes this weekend, she cussed at her entire crowd in Massachusetts, was it? And
yeah, I heard about that.
Yeah, all that she had done really was repeat the phrase "green striped pants" or something to that effect, and then she went on a tirade about angry white men. And that was the only reason why Trump won, because they wanted it to be racist. And so instead of backing off of that, she doubled down while the crowd booed her. And it sounded like more than a couple hundred. And the guy holding the camera, he's like, yeah, she shouldn't take that. She's doing the right thing. So do you think that this is what we're going to be looking at in the future because of how much smaller this group is getting? Where they don't see what they're doing wrong and they continue to double down?
I don't know. My hopes for Trump and my hope for this election really has little to do with policy. It has a lot more to do with culture, like you're describing. I mean, I'm on board for a lot of, clearly we got to get healthcare figured out because it's not working. Clearly we got to get immigration figured out because it's not working. And I'm glad that those policy things might win out because the status quo isn't really helping anybody. But at the end of the day, what I want and what I hope for is the type of cultural reform that you're talking about there. And it's so crazy that this ideology has become so twisted that it was born out of this tolerant belief that people different from you should be listened to and considered and included in all this stuff. And it is morphed so grotesquely that it is now, I mean, these people are the least tolerant that I know. And the gymnastics you can go through to accommodate that hardline worldview. I mean, speaking about Portland and stuff, the one thing that amazed me this week was a lot of my friends are in Portland. As I said, Portland was being destroyed this week. The news also came out that of the arrests in Portland, almost all of them didn't vote. I mean, it's people rioting and destroying the city didn't vote. But so on the one hand, their ideology is so warped that so many of my Portland friends were talking about this in the podcast. So many of them were posting these things all over social media, like, I can't believe that there was this alleged hate crime that happened. We're going to post about how someone called someone a mean word. Meanwhile, you're not going to post about how they're actually burning down the local UPS store or smashing police cars or actually damaging the community in which you live. Why? Because those people doing actual destruction fit your political worldview, and the people who might be saying mean words are a political opponent. And I don't know of anything. I don't know of anything like less tolerant and less anything they stand for. I guess it's just such a weird, contradictory worldview that they live in, and I can't wrap my mind around it. And I try to, but the minute it comes out that I'm skeptical of some of the things that they're saying, like a friend on Facebook. I just questioned some of the hate crimes that were coming out and just asked if there was evidence. And I was accused of implying racism just for asking for evidence.
Yeah, you're a victim blamer now. We'll be taking questions from the room in a minute.
Okay.
Yeah, one last question from me. Do you think that Brexit 2.0 is the effect that we're going to see in the future, where there will be fallout because of the way we voted? And do you think people will attribute it to no one wanting a part in us because of what they think Trump represents?
I might need the question rephrased because I'm not sure I entirely understand it. But one thing I do think is really amazing are the parallels between this and Brexit. And the most amazing parallel now is the sore losers. And I've been fascinated to watch. It's not just the writing; it's the political sore losing. So of course, I forget, is it Feinstein in California or someone's trying to introduce. They called it legislation, but you can't do it with legislation. You need a constitutional amendment. They want to do away with the Electoral College. There's that whole petition to tell the electors to vote Hillary Clinton instead of Donald Trump and just ignore the way that their states voted, all this nonsense. So if Brexit is any indicator, I mean, as far as I understand, Brexit is still in some minor legal limbo. It's not a final thing. There are still steps. There's challenges and things to continue. But if that's any indicator, I don't see a path forward for the people trying to challenge the results of this election because the hurdles are just way too high. But I have no doubt that they will try to do it. I mean, online petitions, that's garbage. That doesn't mean anything. And you're not going to change you're not going to do a constitutional amendment that would require the approval of the majority of the states when you're going to the states and asking them to surrender fair representation to the federal government. What state is going to sign up for that? California and New York? Maybe, but they still think they're going to do it. I don't know. I mean, they'll do anything they can other than sit down, take a good look in the mirror, and think about what you can do to win next time. Why didn't people vote for you this time? Until they'll point fingers in every direction until there's no more direction to be pointed. Maybe they'll keep. Maybe I don't know. They're not going to point them back at themselves. It seems clear. So I'm not feeling optimistic about those crazies.
Now, how do you help people understand what the underlying issues are?
Underlying, can you be a little more specific?
It's just what the real problem is. So I'm not really sure what they mean.
I was the one who wrote the question, as in that the election wasn't the real problem. Like the way they see it, they're just blaming everyone else instead of actually acknowledging that they weren't.
Okay, so the real problem that the asker is presenting is that they're not looking at the way that they strategized or the methods in which they tried to drive voting. Instead, they're pointing at everybody else. So how do you get people to realize that the real problem was them in their own actions?
Well, if I had that answer, maybe I could make the left great again. Here's what I will say. It's because it's hard. I mean, it's interesting because at one level I'm saying you need to reflect on yourself personally, like this particular asker is curious. But what am I doing there? I'm kind of pointing the finger at myself. I'm kind of saying you need to look in the mirror, which is what I'm upset about them for doing, pointing the finger. So, but what I mean is, if you're ever going to have that conversation, you're going to try to talk to somebody who is incapable of self-reflection. The one art that is lost, I think, culturally that I want to restore, and it goes for everyone, although I think the left is having a much tougher time with this now than the right. I want to get back to a place culturally where we all assume each other's good intentions. And if you go to speak with anybody, if it's an adversary, if it's a friend, assume good intentions. If I talk to a Hillary, and they're not doing that right now. That's why they assume you're racist and bigoted, and that's why they assume you're awful because you voted for Donald Trump. If I talk to a Hillary voter, I'm going to assume you had reasons for doing that. I might disagree, or maybe you have some unique situation that I don't understand that explains it. But I'm not going to go to a Hillary voter and assume that you're awful and corrupt and mean and all of these things. Go to people with assuming good intentions and with a legitimate interest in hearing them out. And then maybe once you gain their trust and their friendship, then maybe they'll entertain that question into some of the things that they could have done better.
All right, we're having a bit of a mishap over here. So the next question is, with so much hate against Republicans in mainstream media as well as our social media, how do we encourage our fellow Republicans to continue voicing their opinion despite what might entail socially?
I would say just most of the things they threaten aren't real, to be honest. I mean, there aren't really consequences, at least that I've had in my life and with a lot of the people that I know. And one thing I actually regret, like I'll give you an example. Obviously, I kind of hid behind, I did this project behind a username for a while, and then I went behind my full name. But I also hid my work from family members and from coworkers and from people I went to school with and people I knew, because I know that having the wrong opinion kind of gets you in trouble sometimes. And like I said, I got deleted by some people for having the wrong opinion. But what I also found is that some of the people I thought I was hiding this from, some of the people I didn't want to discover the things I was saying, actually messaged me and were like, oh, I had no idea you were doing this. This is really cool. And I agree with a lot of what you have to say. So what I've found is, like, you should never be afraid or ashamed of your position. You should never be afraid or ashamed of expressing yourself. And if you lose friends over it, they were crappy friends anyway. And if someone comes after you to harass you about it, that's a crappy person anyway. So, as long as you express yourself in a respectful, professional, fair way, and you're not targeting people for harassment or something, don't hesitate, because the threats against you aren't really real. And if they are, they're from terrible people who you shouldn't concern yourself with anyway, to be honest.
Yeah, and I myself was a little surprised because I became a lot more argumentative in the past year in class, and a lot of people will actually try to understand when you do argue out loud and show that, hey, not everybody agrees with you. So yeah, that is a great message, and we are running out of time. So do you have any concluding statements to make?
I don't. I will just reiterate that I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you guys. It's not, if I come off as a little inexperienced in the art, it's because I haven't done this before. So I really appreciate the opportunity to give it a shot. And that was really cool. And of course, if you liked what you hear and you want to check out my work, maybe you're unfamiliar, you can check out my weekly podcast. I do a couple of YouTube videos a week, obviously. You can find links to all of that. Like you said, it's at Matt C on YT on Twitter. If you want to check me out, a link to everything is there. And of course, if maybe you think of something later, you want to reach out to me, you want to talk to me about whatever, Twitter is the easiest way. I respond to almost everything, with rare exception. If you tweet me at like 3 a.m, I might miss it. But I'm pretty good about it. And then also email. Which is also linked on my Twitter page. It's matthewlchristiansen@gmail.com. And that's why I try to make my Twitter handle smaller, is because my name's really long and hard to spell and all that stuff. So, if you have any interest in talking to me anytime, happy to hear from you.
Well, we hope to see you again in the spring. For those of you listening, if you would like to donate to our organization so that we can continue this lecture series in the spring and further on, that would be great. And thank you so much for being with us, Matt Christiansen. That is Matt Christiansen on YouTube, Matt Christiansen on YouTube, Matt C on YT on Twitter, and Beta from Beauty and the Beta podcast. So thank you so much for listening, and thank you so much for joining us, Matt.
Thanks, Isaac. And thanks, everyone else.
Thank you.
I'm going to end the call now.
All right.
You hang up
man.
first.
I'll catch you.
Yeah, definitely. How do I, how do I end this? How do I end? Oh, there we go.